Good morning and welcome to this exciting panel. My name is Hiren Parekh. I'm the VP of Northern Europe for OVHcloud. And as Philip explained, we're a global, secure and trusted cloud provider. And we have over 500 startups on our program today, some of which are already part of the event and I've pitched just earlier. So keen to hear some of the challenges and discuss through this forum and see what tips and tricks you may be able to pick up to help you. This roundtable in particular will be looking at supporting startup and scale-ups that are looking to work and pilot with public and private sector. And the purpose of the roundtable is to help startups, scale-ups learn how best to prepare, pitch, and negotiate those collaborations. So before we start and we get into those questions and things, let's start. We'll turn to our speakers for a quick introduction. So maybe John, you'd like to start us off?
Hi, good morning, everybody. So John Courtney, I'm founder and CEO of this thing, Boardroom Advisors. We provide part-time executive directors and non-executive directors to funded startups, scale-ups and SMEs throughout the UK and increasingly in Europe.
Brilliant. Let's go next, V, maybe.
Yes, hi. Good morning. Yeah, my name is Mapunde, and I'm the program director for the NIHR Surgical MedTech Cooperative, which is a bit of a mouthful, but basically we support startups develop and evaluate new medical technology for use in the NHS. So we're slightly earlier on, but our input definitely does help people get to the other end with less pain.
Thank you, V. David?
Good morning, everybody. My name's David Bozward. I'm currently working for the Royal Agricultural University, but my background is I've done quite a few startups, technology startups, consulting startups, and at the moment I'm helping students and alumni and all sorts of other people start their businesses and grow them. So I've been on both sides of the coin.
Thank you, David. And over to John M. I shall have to specify, right?
Yeah. So my name's John Masters and I'm head of software solutions for Siemens Mobility Intelligent Traffic Solutions. So basically, if you drive a car in the UK or in sort of many other countries as well, your journey is being managed by software that my team wrote. So yeah, that's what we do.
Great. And finally, last but not least, over to Chris.
Morning, everyone. I'm Chris McKee. I'm Business Development and Innovation Manager at the Leeds Teaching Hospital NHS Trust, also a visiting research fellow at the University of Leeds. I work very closely with B and the team as well, but the role really is as a sort of a bridge for innovators to engage with the NHS and academia to help them develop their solutions and evaluate them further, and ultimately to bring new and exciting innovations into our NHS.
It's great. Thank you for those brief introductions. And as you see, we have a varied experience and panel here to discuss. Let's go to one of the first questions here is to say, do you think startups and scale-ups can successfully work with large organizations in the public and private sector? Maybe V, you'd like to comment or start us off for this one?
Yeah, certainly. The answer is yes. So in terms of my work, it's public sector. So that's obviously working predominantly with the NHS. But when I say NHS, it's mainly secondary care that we do our work in, because obviously surgery is based within that. I think there's obviously loads of horror stories about, working with the NHS and trying to get things done in there. But I think part of it is really down to not understanding how the NHS works. I think people have got a very simplified view of how the NHS does its business, or, sometimes people say, well, this is going to save them, instead of buying something for £10,000, my product is going to cost them £500. That's not how the NHS works out cost savings. And it's most certainly concentrates on patient benefit. And I think once you actually understand what the patient benefit is and what outcomes they want to see, it certainly is. You certainly can have a very rewarding and very fruitful engagement with public sector. So I think the key for that is really about understanding how they work, how they function, and what is really important to them. And in light of today, for example, we've had fantastic pitches and things. And if you're looking at it from a health tech and MedTech perspective, it's quite often we get companies coming with obviously the investor pitches like what we've seen, and they're very much appropriate for this type of event. But those pitches do not work when you put them in front of somebody in the NHS. They really couldn't be bothered. So it's about understanding those and working with organizations like ourselves, for example, especially when you're developing it, will really help you, go on the right path.
Maybe Chris, you have something to add on?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with obviously everything that Bea said. It's all pretty much the same. I think historically, and this is why there's probably a little bit of misconception about working in the public sector with the private sector. Historically, it has been difficult. So 10, 15 years ago, people would have probably had a very different view as they would today. I think there are organizations that have been set up and different infrastructures that make the process easier than it has been historically, and the MedTech and in vitro diagnostic cooperatives are definitely one example of that. The academic health science networks are quite good. There are more people in posts like the post that I'm in now, which is a relatively new role. So I think that it's not as hard as people would think to engage with either academic institutions or the NHS organizations. What I would say though is, and I think we alluded to this as well, is it needs to be a good fit. I think if it's a good fit, they'll find the process is a lot smoother. If it's not, then you're going to sink very quickly. And the way to ensure it's a good fit is really to actually engage those organizations very early on. If you're a startup or a spin out, you really want to be engaging with the sector the market you want to enter as soon as possible. Because if you don't, you might find you've done a lot of development for very little gain. That would be my thoughts on it. But otherwise, I think things are definitely getting better, and we do want to make the process more efficient.
Thank you. I like the thought of saying it's more about preparation, having a firm understanding of what are the challenges and how you're relevant to the particular pain or problem that you're solving, which I think is important for sure. And David, would you say that for the more private sector that differentiates, or do you have a different view? Or do you think there's some similarities there?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities there. I can always remember selling to Vodafone games in 2000. And one of the things you've got to remember is that you're normally selling into a guy who his role is to purchase or buy a certain product, but you're also selling into the different layers of management above them. So, and they have different requirements to the guy who's buying mobile phone games. Recently, we were selling wine into the co-op, and the person that buys the wine wants to have a diverse product as part of the portfolio. But actually, what we were really selling to the management were the eco credentials that we had. And sometimes you've got to realize you've got a multi-layer sell. So the CEO has this big vision that you've got to fit in with, but the guy you're selling with, they're looking at their paycheck and they're looking at their bonus. So you sometimes have to understand the organization a little bit more on its levels, and it's not just a single cell that you normally would have gone in with. So yeah, understand the organization is key.
And you would agree, right? Building that contact map and talking to many and not just the one, right? So really kind of evangelizing across. I appreciate it. Thank you. And moving on there, what would you say that are some of the challenges and opportunities that are created by startups when it comes to building that corporate engagement? Maybe John M., I could come to you to kick us off.
So the opportunities goes both ways, doesn't it? So I think from my perspective, what I'm looking for is engagement with startups to support our innovation programs and to give us the opportunity to scale out our innovation. The key issue we have is there's lots of things we'd like to do, but because of our the workload that's on our development teams, for example, and the various people involved in actually delivering projects to customers, it can be very difficult to actually create the space and time for our own teams to actually do the work. And for me, engaging with startups is a really great opportunity to get some fresh thinking, some new ideas, but also to actually get the work done. We can provide the pilots, we can provide the customers for the good ideas, and try them out. But for us, it's very much about scaling out our ability to move fast and innovate quickly. And that's like a two-way responsibility too, because we have to be clear as a corporate when we're going out into the world of startups that we're being crystal clear on what our problems are. We need to be honest about the challenges we're facing, so that we can actually give the startup community the right, the problem that we need solving. So they can actually have a look at it and say, right, okay, yeah, these are problems we can actually solve for you. And if the fit is correct, then a lot of the barriers that might be seen there to bringing a startup in actually melt away. Because if a corporate needs something done, they will make a way of getting it done. They'll make it happen somehow. A lot of those blockers and barriers will suddenly disappear.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to add to that?
Yeah, just a quick point. When you're into a large organization, you're normally thinking about the sales, but actually venture funding is also a good thing to think about, because these large corporates, they're not as always fast as they want to be. And if they see a good startup, then they may bring some cash into the deal. And also asking for money up front to help fund new products and new innovation. If you don't ask, you don't get in life. So always try and think about the other things you can get from this corporate rather than just the sale.
Great. Thank you. And could someone maybe share an example of the biggest challenge when it comes to working with a startup or scale up, and how you've managed to overcome that? Maybe John C, can come to you and have your thoughts on this.
I was on mute. Sorry, yeah, absolutely. Listen, there's lots of challenges, aren't there? I think one of the core issues created by the startup, or faced by the startup, rather, is when you're engaging with the corporate. How do you do that? At what level? How do you make the connection? Do you have the resources internally to make that connection and to go forward? Do you need help and advice from outside? Do you need a consultant or a mentor or somebody to make introductions? It's having the contacts at the right level, and often with corporates, it's having the connection at several different levels. Because as somebody said earlier, you need buy-in, not just from the person you're speaking to, but perhaps from the management team and the bosses and so on. John, the other John's nodding there. So yeah, I guess that's one of the challenges.
Great, thank you. And from those nods, would anyone like to add?
Yeah, I mean, from a public sector sort of point of view, it's very similar problems. One of the biggest challenges that I've come across and others that I work with is sort of managing expectations. I think for SMEs, they're on a slightly different time scale, I guess, to what, let's say, academic institutions or NHS organizations are working on, and they might have an incorrect perspective of what, let's say, when they can go to a first-in-man study or something like that, and they often then get a little bit shocked when they say, okay, well, we want to go to trial within 6 months, and we say, well, now that we're looking at this and we're designing this, you're looking at more like 18 months, and it's sort of managing those expectations early on. That's quite important. I think we have exactly the same problem as well of making sure you're talking to the right person. So for me, I always say that my role is like as an enabler. And I think you would agree it's a similar kind of role for yourself. We're there to help people get in front of the right people, but ultimately we're not here to make that final decision. We can use our expertise to say, yes, this looks good, it's a good fit, and we can help people pitch in the right way. And I have done this a few times where you get to that point, but then when the clinicians finally look at it and they're ultimately your the market you're trying to enter, they say, oh, I don't really see it as a fit. So I think, and then you have to kind of work with the company to make sure they're pitching it the right way so that the clinicians engage with it. So for me, that's kind of one of the challenges is sort of, it's translating the language between these different groups, because they all speak a very different language. Even if it's all English, it's not necessarily the same English.
Mhm.
And it's that managing those expectations early on. And I think that problem is just as relevant in the private sector as it is in the public sector, to be honest.
Yeah, can I just add on to that? And I think adding on to what Chris is saying, particularly for health tech and MedTech, what we typically see is a lot of SMEs and startups come with a solution that's already made, and that's not the best way to get to procurement, because what are they supposed to do with it? When they look at a ready-made solution, you might as well be giving them Amazon to have a look at, because then there's loads of different things they can choose from. What makes your particular innovation stand out from everything else that they have seen? So coming with a solution, particularly for health tech and MedTech to the NHS is definitely not the way to go. You need to actually find out what problems they want solved, and then you can try and see whether your particular innovation or technology can fit that. And it's also worth bearing in mind that innovation then splits into two categories. So for the NHS, you've got system innovation, which is looking at, technology to speed up, theatre lists or something like that, which is handled by a completely different team and probably more difficult to get into. And you've got the technology, which is directly patient facing, which is someone's going to use this on a patient and it's going to improve the life of a patient. NHS trusts are involved in the direct patient. They're more interested in the direct patient facing technology rather than the systems ones, because with that, it's like I said, it's Amazon to them. It's how do you differentiate unless you actually involve them early on in the process and ask them what problems do they want solving from a company, and then you'll get better outcome from that.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. It comes back to the former point that everyone has made, right? Is about how do you be relevant? How are you part of that journey? How do you come in early, doing your research? And again, it's truly understanding what is the solution this is bringing. And I like the element there of the sort of the more patient facing and understanding how you solve that solution. So very, very interesting thoughts. I mean, working with that, would someone then care to share perhaps the biggest startup or scale-up engagement success to date? Maybe
Happy to. Listen, it's always nice to be able to help the startups, and around the UK we've got just this week we got somebody some funding, 150,000 or so. So personally, my biggest, I think the one I'm most proud of is I had an assignment as a part-time marketing director for a cybersecurity company, and at the end, I was there for 2 years. At the end of my time, we managed to get Queen's Award for export, which really helped them boost their profile worldwide, got them a lot of business, flying the British flag and all that. So I guess that's my biggest success, but I'm sure others have got bigger ones than that.
Great. Would anyone like to share another example?
Yeah, sure. I did the classic startup. I think we're talking about 20 years ago now, and we started a mobile phone games company. And we actually went to Vodafone UK, and we said we'd have 10 games by November, and this was in May. We didn't have 10 games. My co-founder was absolutely furious with me. But we pulled all the stops out and we produced these 10 games for Vodafone UK. And literally overnight, all the other Vodafone territories came into line, and suddenly they all wanted the same 10 games. So we became very, very successful overnight. Nobody else had 10 games in the whole world. I don't recommend overcommitting, but certainly trying to pitch, you've got to have a USP. You've got to be different. And when you understand that a client wants to go to market, being a core part of that going to market strategy really does help.
Great, thank you. So coming maybe on the other side then, for example, to say we've talked a lot about how do startups engage with the corporate or the public sector, if you like. What could the public or private sector learn from startups and scale-ups? So looking the other way around. Maybe John, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, well, loads is the answer to that question. In a corporate, of course, we are saddled with a ton of process. We have legacy applications, we have legacy processes, all of that, a ton of bureaucracy. And I think the thing for me that's really exciting about working with startups is when we see all of these new, fresh ideas about how you get work done, how you deliver value very, very quickly. It's really exciting to me to see how that is and how we take some of that startup energy and organization and how we then bring that into our own teams and learn from them. How do we create entrepreneurship within our own organization, for example, taking the lessons from startups. So I think so, and in return, of course, we have the opportunity to unlock customers and opportunities that they may not have. So for me, it's really exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing where this takes us in the future.
Great, thank you. David, would you like to add a comment too on that point?
Yeah, I think one of the key things I think larger companies forget is the customer, whereas small companies are very, very customer focused, and because the customer's got the money and they're normally cash poor. So what's interesting there is that working with smaller businesses, they intensely get to know that customer really well, and that's an inspiration for me, because sometimes we forget who our customer, well, we think we know who our customer is, and of course our customer does change, and COVID-19 and Brexit have been fascinating because all of our customers have changed, and they're almost unrecognizable today than they were 2 or 3 years ago. And I think lots of businesses are forgetting that change, even though we all know we've changed, but that as a business, we forget that we've changed. And that's really the quandary that larger businesses have. And the pitches today, a lot of those had realized the changes that have happened over the last couple of years and have reacted to it. But I would imagine there's lots of larger organizations that are still thinking we're going to go back to a 5-day week in the office. We're still going to have, what annoys me is people say we're going to have we're going to go and visit the doctor. I've seen my doctor a few times in the last 2 years, and I'm quite happy to sit on this side of the screen without getting a cold every time I go to the doctor's surgery. And we still see these big businesses trying to go back to the old model, whereas new businesses are thriving on a new model.
I think you're absolutely right, David. I mean, I was literally in a conversation yesterday where an R&D engineer was talking about they'd had a conversation with a customer, and it's like, well, hang on a minute, don't we have a department for that? And it's crazy. The huge disconnect sometimes in the larger corporates, and that's obviously something that we try and address through adopting more DevOps cultures and those sorts of things. And again, that's where the startups can help us, because they can show us the way.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I would, I agree completely with all of those points as well. And a big thing for me engaging with startups is that it sort of drives a different culture, particularly in the public sector. So we kind of call it a culture of innovation. So a lot of people routinely go through their daily work practices and they don't think about how to do things differently, but actually engaging with a startup who has an interesting solution can get people thinking differently, and then saying, oh, I didn't even realize we could do things this way. So actually it's quite good to engage with SMEs and startups and different types of innovators to get people thinking outside of the box and get them excited about different solutions. One thing, in fact, a couple of things that have come through that have been really good for that have been things like VR and AR. It's very easy to get people's attention with that. Or for radiologists, the use of AI in sort of diagnosing different disease types, and it really helps them. So once one or two people kind of latch onto it, then the word spreads. So I think that's been a really good thing of engaging with sort of the innovation sector from my side.
Great, thank you. I think it's clear, right? I think you each of you allude to the fact that yes, that sort of speed, agility, or that sort of fresher way of looking at things is certainly a value that the startups do bring, and that sort of innovation and speed is important, and particularly in the current climate where things are working differently and things may well work differently for some time, and people are rethinking that process. They may have an idea, but I think the outcome may be quite different actually. So very interesting to hear those thoughts. And I guess in closing on the session here, this is a question everyone's waiting for, is having, with your experience working in this ecosystem of startups and public sector and private sector, and the experience that you come with, what is the best tip that you could provide for a startup or scale up that's wanting to create that engagement into the public and private sector, and wanting to advance their business?
Can I start on that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would suggest start at home. So make sure that you've bottomed out your value proposition, and in particular your target market. What's your product or service? Who are you focusing on before you start trying to sell into anybody, whether that's public or private sector? Think it all the way through. Which sectors of the marketplace are going to most benefit from your product or service? Start to build those relationships and hone and focus on those areas, rather than, listen, I've been a startup. You tend to want to just sell to anything that moves, and that isn't very productive. So get focused, do your groundwork, and get your marketing strategy bottomed out first.
Great, thank you.
I'm happy to go next. My advice, I've been kind of saying this throughout the session, but my advice would be engage early, as early on as you can, and don't sell. Come to us collaboratively and open-minded, just don't come to us with a sales pitch, particularly in the public sector, but I imagine it's also the same in the private sector as well.
Yeah, I think I would echo a lot of what's already been said. Get connected to a person or people within the corporate that you want to work with. Find out what their problems really are. Don't try and sell them something that they've already got, because then you have to deal with purchasing and all the rest of it. But find out what they actually need and make sure that what you have can deliver that, and then be flexible, which I think is what V was saying earlier. Just be super flexible, because there will be constraints that we're working to that you may not have encountered yet, constraints on compliancy and all these sorts of things that you may not have encountered. So be prepared to be flexible.
Well, I think the other thing I just add quickly to that is that people don't like to be sold to. Nobody in private, in public, we don't like to be sold to. We like sometimes to buy. So it's just the normal process. You have to find out what it is that your customer needs, where's his pain point, and then you have to adjust your proposition, your service, your product, whatever it is, in order to fit that pain point. Don't try and assume that what you've got is a ready-made package and they're going to buy it because they're obviously going to have that pain point. That's nearly always not the case. You've got to manipulate what you've got, maneuver it so that it fits what the client needs, and then he may happily buy.
Absolutely.
I echo all the points that everybody said, and I think and one of the things I think, if you're coming from the outside, is particularly the NHS, like as others have alluded to, is a different culture. I think just be prepared to think differently. What happens in your world or how fast things move in your world, the NHS is not going to stop and take that into consideration. Ultimately, it's got a job to do, and that job is very different to what you're offering. So adapting your mindset, apart from managing your expectations, is also very important.
For me, it's do your research the people in the organization, research the technology they use, research the business model that they've got or want to use, research the business cycle that they have. Certain businesses have cycles. For instance, in education, we won't accept anything new while we're in the cycle. We'll only do it before or after the academic year, and look at the mega trends. So, what are the industry trends and how you can fit into those trends. So yeah, do your research.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I think that was really some insightful, particularly that last question. I would say that a lot of the people viewing today will be able to take some stuff away, and be able to kind of understand better how they shape it. I think I was pick up on one of the points that really resonate for me that stand out, is John C, where you talk about, and I guess as a startup, going off or something. There we go. Music. There we go. Music to end the session. That's an alarm, right? It says you're over by 3 minutes. So yes, we better cut it short. No, I think it was very, very interesting. Oh, there it goes again. I think it was very interesting to say how certainly the element that you mentioned of knowing the market and knowing the target. And I think as a startup, you invest a lot, so you want to get the returns, and you could be tempted to get money wherever it comes from. But I think it's important that you're true to what your idea is and where you want to go, that you're establishing yourself in a certain market. That was very, very interesting there. And thank you to everyone for joining us. Thank you. And I hope everyone found this useful. Let's go on to enjoy the other events and the rest of the day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Bye-bye.